And so we notice that many of our sisters defending practices cataloged by Orientalists, media, and non-Muslims as symbols of oppression through the ultimate authority of selfhood and its autonomy. Give me a second. Again, back to my disclaimer. I just wrote this right now, right? So influential is this idea, so deeply embedded in the fabric of our imaginary, that the claim to moral autonomy has become a major argument for Islamic practices. And so we notice many of our sisters defending practices cataloged by Orientalist, media, and non-Muslims as symbol of oppression through the ultimate authority of selfhood and its autonomous agentive quality. The response of many then to the banning or questioning of hijab in public spaces was and is hijab, my choice, my right, my life. Certainly, there is a problem with validating Muslim practices through the ground of personal agency and freedom. For one, it does not seem to be a valid description of why Muslims do certain things and abstain from others. Can we truthfully speak of absolute choice in getting up for Fajr during winter when one has only slept 3 or 4 hours? Can one speak of choice in lowering one's gaze or in backbiting, in fasting during Ramadan? Beyond the difficulties of exerting personal choice over what is perceived or read as divine commandment is the mere fact that for many, if not for most women, hijab, like lowering the gaze or fasting, is not one from among a menu of free choices. Rather, it is a lived practice whose facilitation is aided by communal, discursive, and self-embodied pressures to prevent certain possibilities from being either desired or practiced, like not wearing hijab, or like wearing a hijab to match a miniskirt. What I want to do now is to look at this concept of the free individual as unencumbered by pre-existing bonds, expectations, and responsibilities. Certainly, one source for understanding the feature of said selfhood is to be found in pop culture. Why this source and the vision of the self that it mass produces and sells is of importance is due to the centrality that the pop artist and celebrity is given in our contemporary culture of spectacle. If modernity once raised the scientists, social planners, and history, this song can in no way be understood to form a coherent unit, in that it is thoroughly postmodern. Save by the self's will to power. Again, this song of hers, the topics embedded and enmeshed into it, can in no way make a single coherent argument or unit. Rather, they are so thoroughly contradictory that it is only by her will to power, by the self's will to power, that they can comfortably lie together within the song and within Beyonce's worldview. And so the song in the first verse, some women, or perhaps all women, are asked to recognize their place vis-a-vis Beyonce. They are reminded that when they were little, their dreams were of Queen Bee's reality. In other words, every single woman here, when you were little, you dreamt of becoming Beyonce. You wish Beyonce, right? Beyonce is that crystallization of everything which is great and exalted in womanhood and in humanhood, right? She then proceeds by telling the woman to bow down. And then she calls women, female dogs, and so on and so forth, right? And so again, when you were little, you dreamt of this, bow down to her crown. This very same verse continues to decry patriarchy, which objectifies women, and places them in perpetual competitions of beauty. The second verse continues by reinstating, just in case you forgot, that Beyonce, much like her garments, toys, and jeweled trinkets, are flawless. Again, the song begins by telling every woman here and on the planet that they need to bow down to Beyonce, as she is beyond your capacities. She then continues by speaking against patriarchy and how it places woman and creates woman, or makes woman fashions women into sexual objects, which then fight against each other, right, in order to have a great place within this patriarchy, so on and so forth. One second. Her feminism here is unencumbered by claim to supreme hotness and the veneer of perfection. I am reminded here of a conversation that I had with a feminist, wherein I was told that feminism need not be used as a methodology, nor as an need be used as a methodology, and not as an ideology or as a way of life. As clear support of this claim, I was given the example of a feminist who is in a sexual relationship with a married man. Feminism as an ideology would claim that to participate in said relationship would be tantamount to succumbing to patriarchy. While the self here needs to judge outside of any collective coercion whether or not this is appropriate. Feminism here then should not trump self-satisfaction. If and when it does, it may be suspended at will by the will. In other words, just to reiterate, and I certainly do not believe that this is a general feminist position, but I was told by a particular feminist once again that feminism can be used simply as a tool and as a methodology, right? As opposed to as an overarching worldview, which at times dictates what it is that we do. And again, the example that was given to me was of a feminist who is engaged in a sexual relationship with a married man. I was then told that surely feminism would find something problematic with this, but the self, however, need then to decide whether it can put to the side feminism as a methodology, right, and then continue unencumbered. Once again, as I stated, I do not think that this is a general position of feminists, but certainly this is Beyonce's position and the feminist too, which shall remain unnamed, right? While many of us may claim that these celebrities display radical attitudes towards the self, I would claim, one, that they are nothing but the engorged swelling of the type of ego which has become commonplace, and two, while the possibilities of most cannot compare with the playlands of celebrities, many of us share in similar attitudes in fantasy and in hopefulness. The extreme, however, is not what I have pointed out with Beyonce's song. What I have pointed to here, again, is the harmonious coexistence of contradictions within Beyonce, which are overcome by a triumph of the ego over and above its now disfigured components. For in order for Beyonce's feminism to exist side by side with her choice to be a marketed product of raw sexuality and desire, feminism must be truncated beyond recognition. This social phenomenon is what MacIntyre refers to, Alistair MacIntyre, the Christian philosopher of ethics and morality, refers to as the democratized self, or the democratizing of moral agency. This democratized self is nothing other than the liberal self of liberalism. The promotion of a liberal self is described by the philosopher MacIntyre and Wolin, the political theorist, as truly monumental in history. Wolin states, what was truly radical in liberalism was its conception of society as a network of activities carried on by actors who know no principle of authority. In such a state where there is no overriding theory of the good, whereby one can gauge individual actions, the basis of practical rationality or deeds is completely reconfigured. MacIntyre states that prior to liberalism and within other ethical traditions, individuals justified their actions through types of argumentations grounded in shared values and goals. According to him, this shift towards liberalism has meant that the arguments for action no longer need to begin with shared premises, but can begin and end with the aesthetic preference of the individual. The case is no longer stated as I ought to, so on and so forth, as in I ought to not fast as I am sick and I can provide evidence that one should not fast when one is sick, but rather is now presented as an individual desire for such and such to be the case. As in, I do not want to fast because I want to eat. Again, rather than starting from the question, what ought I to do? The new question for the liberal self is, what do I want to do? Both of these having no qualitative difference. MacIntyre states, what was new was the transformation of first-person expression of desires themselves without further qualification into statements of a reason for argument, into premises for practical reasoning. Here, every individual is absolutely free to follow or invent whatever conceptions of the good they please. The exception, of course, would be if a particular conception of the good attempts to transgress on other individual conceptions.